Moshe Borukh, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with the National Rifle Association. Your story, it came across my desk when, unfortunately, you had that worst case scenario or close to worst case scenario happen. Every man's fear, glass breaking in the middle of the night, and a bad guy coming into your home. Uh, if you could set the story, I think it was 2:40 a.m. and you live in Queens, a suburb or a borough of New York City. Uh, but if you could set the scene to say, tell us what happened, how that started, what you saw, heard.
Sure. First, I want to thank you for inviting me on here. I live in Jamaica State, which is very close to St. John's University. It's a relatively, prominent affluent area. A lot of Jewish people. Real estate taxes are relatively high in the Queens area. So, we're not relatively, I don't want to say wealthy, but it's a relatively expensive area. And so a lot of these criminals, they come over here because they know people don't have guns. They're not armed. And so they think they can get away with these things. And unfortunately they do. And on this particular night, I came home from an event. So I had a little bit too much to drink. I was a little bit dehydrated. And around 2:30 in the morning, I got a drink of water. It was a divine intervention. I got up to get a drink of water. And while I'm falling back asleep after that, after getting some water, I hear some muffling downstairs by the window. Now in the summer, we have a lot of raccoons. So I thought it was like a raccoon digging into garbage or something. But then I start to hear like something breaking. And then I've heard the glass break. And so I'm like, you know what? Now it sounds like something's happened. So naturally, I always have my safe with the fingerprint, my gun inside next to my bed. And so I automatically put my fingerprint on it. It opened up, took my 9mm Glock, and I went downstairs. As I'm coming through the hall to get downstairs, I actually hear somebody coming inside the kitchen area in the back. And that's where I started to come downstairs, and I started pointing in that direction.
What are you feeling at that moment? I've always wondered in that situation. Of course, I've talked to a lot of armed citizens, but and I'm one myself. But I've always wondered in that moment. I mean, you're approaching. You don't know what. You have kids in your house. You have young children in the house. Your wife's in the house. What are you feeling right then?
At that particular time, I thought I was outraged that somebody had the balls to come into my home. I was like, is this really happening right now? Like you always see it on TV, you're like, oh, that's bad luck. Then it happens to you. You're like, there's no way this is happening. So it felt surreal at the time. But at the same time, I felt like I had an obligation to keep my head on my shoulders and do what I needed to do to protect my family. And in the video, you see my spouse behind me. She was terrified. She was like, she froze. And so, thank God I had the composure to be calm and collected, which I didn't think I had in me in these types of situations because I've never been in this situation before. You don't know, you don't know when you know. And so, I was a little scared. I'm not going to lie, but I had to be a man. I had to do what I had to do. I have people to protect. It's my castle. You're not coming into my castle and stealing from me. So, I did have a little bit of mixed feelings at that time.
I would imagine. I mean, you have, I think it's 3 kids.
I have a 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and 4-year-old.
Well, and I would imagine that hour they're all in bed in your home at night.
Yeah, they were all sleeping. They were all sound asleep. But when the window was breaking, my daughter and my son, they woke up, the eldest ones. And so they heard some type of commotion downstairs. My wife came over and closed their door and pretended like everything was okay, like whitewash everything, because the last thing we want is for them to get, terrified in the future about what happened,
Very smart woman. So you come into the kitchen and see him? Do you make eye contact? What happens?
I made eye contact with him. So I had my gun drawn and I kept yelling. I remember I almost lost my voice. I'm like, I have a gun. Don't come in. Don't make the mistake. Don't move. And I pointed and I have the crosshair right in the area of where his head would come out in that gap when he peed. And so when his head came out, at that time, I thought it was armed, right? I thought there was a bullet in the chamber. Luckily for me, there was no bullet in the chamber, and I pulled the trigger because I saw him pick something up that was shiny with a flashlight, and I thought that was a gun. And so when I saw him, he was right on my crosshair, and I pulled the trigger, and it didn't fire. Then you'll see me in the video go right back upstairs and try to maneuver and make sure that it's loaded. And by that time, he already had left. Thank God.
Well, good. And I'm sorry you had to go through the process of actually pulling the trigger. And right, and he left the scene.
He ran like the coward.
What? Yeah, and I'm glad he did, and I'm glad you didn't have to do what you felt you almost had to do there.
Also, so an interesting thing. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if you know this. The NYPD reached out to me via letter and demanded an answer as to why I took out my gun and pulled the trigger. They're putting more resources into investigating me now than the actual perpetrators. That's really what pissed me off. They're asking me why I had to pull the trigger. I mean, you saw the video. There was 3 of them. 2 of them were outside, and we knew that before they came in. So I'm thinking, they're coming in locked and loaded. You're asking me why I had to pull the trigger. I mean, it was outrageous. It's almost as if I did something wrong. And in that same letter, they called me a threat to public safety.
Is this NYPD? Who did the letter come from?
The City of New York via the NYPD licensing division of for the firearms.
Wow. Okay. Now, you have a home security system, so you have
It wasn't done yet. Yeah, it wasn't personal.
Right. Have they been able to identify these people?
No. As of now, there are no leads whatsoever. I haven't heard from the detectives since that day.
And they were trying to steal your car. Is that right?
We know it was the car now because after they left my home, they actually succeeded in burglarizing another few homes and took the keys and actually took the cars. The detective who was in my home actually chased them. He was literally behind them, and then he let them go. And I said, "Why did you let them go?" And he said, "The policy now is if it creates a public safety hazard to chase them, we're told to stop." So the rules now are bent over for these criminals to help them. You know, it's just outrageous.
Right. What kind of window did he break to get in? Did he have to crawl in, or was it a door?
No, it was one of those really big ones that you see in, relatively big homes. Like, I don't know what the size.
Sliding glass door kind of thing?
No, it was a big panel, and it had like a little security feature. And what they do is they don't actually break the window glass. They break the mechanism that holds the window closed. And so once you break that, all you have to do is swing open the window and you get right in.
Okay, so he was able to
know what they're doing.
Yeah, I would. Did he leave tools behind? Did he do something to open that with, or is that something they just used?
It was a very thin crowbar that he used, but he took it with him. That was one of the things that I thought was a weapon, or the phone and the crowbar.
Now, were you able to clearly see his face, or was he masked? Or
he was wearing a mask, but I saw his eyes, even in the dark. I locked with him, and that's when I realized, this guy's here. It was just surreal.
Right. Were these young men, or?
They looked relatively young. Why do you? It's the way that they were walking, the way that they were running away. They looked relatively very young. Definitely not elder men. Yeah, elder men. I mean, the way that they were running away, they were pretty fast.
Well, now you're an attorney. So I'm wondering, as you're looking at the system, and you're an attorney in New York City, what is the process for you to go through with the police and the investigation? Is there anything you can be doing to make sure they're actually following up on this?
No, I've believe it or not, I've had my car broken into in front of my house before. And when that happened, I made a call and they said, yeah, there's nothing we can do, literally. And so that's why this keeps happening. There's nothing to deter these people. And even if they get caught, the next day they get out and they do the same thing. It's catch and release. And so why wouldn't they do it? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't they?
Now, the pistol permit process there in New York City, how long ago did you get a permit?
I got mine, I would say about 2 years ago. But now it's much quicker because we found out that there's something called Article 78. And what that does is it basically forces a government agency to give you something that they should have given you a long time ago. The law in the state of New York is by the time you submit your application, they have a 6-month window to get you your gun. And so as long as you've submitted your application, you've given them all the documents, they cannot take more than 6 months. But 90% of the time, it's always more than 6 months. So that's where we come in. We file Article 78 and we basically tell a judge, look, judge, here's the law. Here's the application. They haven't responded. We want the license. And 99% of the time we get it granted and it's no problem.
Right. Since the Bruin decision, I would imagine things have gotten easier.
Oh, yes.
In New York City.
Now you don't have to prove why you need it. Before you had to show them that you had some type of safety issue with, maybe you're fearful of your life. You don't have to provide some of these things anymore.
Right. But the training requirement in New York is still there as far as about
16 and a half years.
Where did you find your training, and how was that process?
It was in, I think it was Mineola somewhere. I forgot the name of it, but it was in Mineola. He was a former detective, great guy. It was a 2-day course, 16 hours. And then you get you get to play with the fake gun and shoot as you're flying the test, which was really fun.
Right. That's mandatory now to go through that process. How expensive was it, or is it, to go through this whole process?
All in, without hiring an attorney, I probably paid, without purchasing the firearm, A total about 800 to 900 bucks, give or take.
So 6 months and $1,000. A law-abiding citizen can finally use their rights.
Right.
But at least there is a process now. At least there is an opportunity to defend yourself. I mean, I'm trying to think, and I hate to speculate, but what would have happened if you weren't armed in that situation, that person in your kitchen?
So even when I yelled at him, I said, "I'm armed, don't come in," he continued to come in. So he knew somebody was home. He didn't care.
He didn't
These
believe
people
you.
just, yeah, they're banking on somebody hiding or not being armed and just quickly getting it and running. What would have happened? I don't know. I had no idea. But there was three of them. And so, they looked like they were prepared to do something, was it deadly physical force? I had no idea. I don't want to speculate either.
No, but they're in charge in that point, and that isn't what you want inside your own home, especially.
Right. Exactly.
So how are you and your wife, your kids, how are you feeling about this neighborhood in New York City now? I mean, I would imagine you're a lifelong New Yorker, right? You sound like one to me.
I was raised in New York City my whole life. So I'm begging my parents and my in-laws to move to Nassau County. But I won't move until they do because they help us with the babysitting and stuff. It's very convenient. I don't want to continue to live here, to be completely honest with you. We paid millions of dollars for our homes. We paid exorbitant amount of taxes for what? And I think it's only going to get worse. So I want to get a head start in trying to move, but it's so difficult moving into Nassau with nobody next to you. You don't know anybody. There's really no community like the Jewish community that we are here in Queens. And so that to me is more important than, I guess I don't want to say my safety, but I'm armed. I'm not scared. I'm not afraid at all. If they come back, I hope they don't, they know what's going to be waiting for them. And this time there will be a bullet in the chamber.
Well, I hope you don't have to do anything like that. But I'm wondering, are many of your neighbors following you down this path and also getting their concealed carry permits and
Yeah. Yeah.
being ready for these situations? Or
All of my neighbors know that I do this for a living. And so they've all reached out to me. Most of them already have weapons. I go to a synagogue on Friday nights and Saturdays. My entire synagogue comes to me for their permits. So everybody's armed. And I'm not sure if you know, there's a new law that allows you now to bring your gun to the temple, which is great because what's the point if you can't bring it and protect your congregation? You know what I mean?
no, for other reasons too, with what's been happening to the Jewish community. Absolutely. Any other advice you'd give to somebody who might be unarmed in New York City and wants to be armed?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a perfect example. I'm a living example of why you need a gun in New York City. Some people are afraid to get them. They always say, I don't know, my kids, this, that. There are ways to protect your children and your family from a gun. There's so many things you can do to make sure that that's not going to be an issue. Without a gun, I don't think I would have came out the same way. I would have either lost my Bentley or I would have, they would have stole something else. So, and you saw how fast they ran after they saw the gun. It works because it's one thing you can't fight against is a firearm. Even as a homeowner, somebody comes out with a gun. I don't care how big and strong you are. You're not overcoming the force of a gun. And so it is so important to be armed because you can stay at a distance and not be confronted, by your perpetrator and be able to eliminate threat. It's so important.
Right. On almost 90% of these situations where an armed citizen has to put their hands on a gun, no shot is fired. And it's almost always the case. And it's not reported much in the media that's the case because people are responsible. They don't want to do what you almost had to do. And I'm glad you didn't have to do it.
If it's funny, the detectives, when they came in, they're like, did you shoot him? Did you get him? I'm like, no. They're like, damn it. They're like, we wish you had actually shot him. Save us more time investigating on another case, They also, they're sick of it too, these cops. They're good guys. But I think they're handicapped now by the policies that don't allow them to actually do their jobs. And they know that, and they don't want to get fired. They don't want to lose their pension. And so I get from their perspective why they're handicapped and they can't do certain things. That's why you need a gun, because believe it or not, the cops are not going to save you. And I'll tell you one more thing. When my wife called the police while I was going downstairs, it took them 20 minutes to get to my home. 20 minutes. Knowing that there is active burglary took them 20 minutes. And then when they did arrive, they strolled into my area like they were getting coffee at a Starbucks. No urgency, nothing whatsoever. And so, again, go back to my point. Nobody's going to save you except yourself. Don't rely on the police. By the time they get there, they'll be done with their job. And so 911 is not your savior here.
Well, we like to think it is, but we have to be our own first responder until we don't. And absolutely where you were. Well, thank you, and I'm happy to see that you're okay, and I hope that community gets safer. With your new mayor, I'm not confident, but I've known enough NYPD police officers to know that you're exactly right. They must be very frustrated with the situation.
There. I appreciate you having me, friend.